Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a world where your alarm clock is a rooster you never asked for, your mattress is stuffed with whatever the local field can spare, and your to-do list begins before the sun even considers showing up. You're about to wander, half awake, into the daily life of a medieval woman, and yes, you probably won't survive this. Not because anything dramatic happens, but because you'd tap out long before breakfast even begins. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, let me know your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before dawn because everyone like you wakes before dawn. Not through choice, obviously, it's simply what's required. The air around you is cold, that faint damp chill that clings to straw bedding and stones alike. You shift, hearing the faint rustle of your palate, a reminder that comfort isn't the point here. Your body aches in its usual spots, the ones you've quietly accepted as part of life, and for a moment you lie still, hoping no one notices that you're awake yet. Spoiler, they will. There's a dim, bluish nothingness in the single room you call home, just enough light to make out the sleeping shapes of everyone else. Medieval houses don't really do privacy. You share space with family, maybe animals, and the soft snoring of someone who definitely had too much ale last night. Your breath forms faint mist in the air. No insulation, no glass windows, just wooden shutters that keep out, well, nothing relevant. You pull yourself upright because that's your job today, and every day. Across Europe, records show that medieval women handled most of the early morning tasks, tending the fire, preparing food, checking on animals. A mainstream fact? Sure, most households counted on women to restart the hearth every morning, since fire was precious and rarely allowed to go out entirely. You stretch your arms, and a straw fragment from your bedding floats off like it's trying to escape too. You shuffle to the doorway, careful not to trip over someone's foot, not your finest moment if it happens, and push the shutter open. A faint breeze slips in, carrying that familiar pre-dawn smell of damp earth, smoke, and whatever the neighbours are cooking or burning or hiding. You step outside. The world is grey, quiet, and a little grouchy looking, which matches your mood perfectly. Your feet land in the packed dirt, still cool from the night. Somewhere in the distance a dog barks, then immediately regrets how loud it was. This is your moment of near silence before the avalanche of chores crashes over you. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the sound of historians still, arguing whether medieval mornings were peaceful or chaotic. Some swear the day began slowly. Others insist women were overwhelmed from the first minute. Honestly, you're leaning toward overwhelmed, but whispered under your breath so no one hears you complaining. You glance at the dark outline of the fields, where someone will eventually expect you to help with planting or harvesting depending on the season. Medieval life is a big group project where nobody ever does your share for you. You wander toward the small lean-to by the house where tools lean precariously, waiting to be used yet again. Everything is worn smooth by hands just like yours. There's a quirky little tidbit you remember, something your grandmother once said. If you whisper a short rhyme to the tools before using them, they'll work easier today. It's half superstition, half entertainment, but in a world without coffee or ergonomic handles, you take whatever encouragement you can get. You mutter the rhyme under your breath. It doesn't help physically, but it makes you feel mildly powerful, which is basically the same thing. As you stand there in the dimness, you become aware of how much responsibility sits on your shoulders. Breakfast isn't going to cook itself. The fire won't magically restart, and someone, somewhere inside that house, is probably already stirring and about to ask you whether there's warm water. Medieval time management is more survival than scheduling. You move to the dark, sleeping hearth and poke at the ash, hoping for a stubborn ember. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. Today you find a faint orange glow. Victory. Not won a lottery victory, but I don't have to spend 30 freezing minutes creating fire from scratch victory. You place straw and twigs carefully, coaxing them with gentle breaths, like you're trying to sweet-talk an annoyed cat. Slowly the fire brightens, casting warm, flickering gold across the walls. Your hands warm a little, which is nice, but there's no time to linger. A pot needs filling. Flour must be prepared. Someone just coughed from the bedding pile, which means questions are incoming. You inhale deeply and stand, letting your mind adjust to the steady rhythm that defines your life. Waking early isn't a punishment here, it's simply what women do, expected and unremarkable. As the room brightens with the first hints of sunrise, you take a final glance toward the opening in the wall. The sky's turning pale pink, the kind of pretty that medieval poets love to describe, though you have no time to appreciate it properly. The warmth of the fire behind you contrasts sharply with the chilly morning air, and you know you'll be moving between those extremes all day long. It becomes a kind of dance, the uncelebrated choreography of medieval womanhood. You roll your shoulders once more and step into the flow of tasks waiting for you. The faint crunch of straw underfoot, the smoky tang in the air, the distant stirrings of your household, they all tell you the same thing. The day has begun, and you're at its centre, even if no one ever says so. You're already moving before your thoughts fully wake up, drifting toward the hearth like it's an old friend who demands constant attention and never stops complaining. The tiny flame you coaxed earlier needs feeding, and fast. You kneel, feeling cold stone press against your knees, and add slightly larger sticks, stacking them with the quiet resignation of someone who knows this task will repeat tomorrow, and the next day, and forever, unless you get wildly lucky and someone invents central heating centuries early. Spoiler, they will not. The fire crackles back at you, warming your face just enough to remind you how cold the rest of the world is. Your hands hover near the flames, absorbing what little comfort they can, because in a medieval house, the hearth isn't just a place to cook. It's the sun, the heater, the gossip corner, the light source, the emotional support campfire, basically the multi-tool of domestic life. Mainstream fact, in most medieval homes the hearth was the literal and symbolic centre of household activity. If it goes out, your entire day collapses like a badly built loaf of bread. A faint shuffle sounds behind you, someone waking. You don't look back. If you make eye contact, they'll ask a question, and questions lead to chores, and chores lead to more chores, and we don't need that chain reaction right now. You stay laser-focused on arranging the pot above the flame, pretending not to hear anything. It works for about 4 seconds. A sleepy voice murmurs something unintelligible. You hum a vague response that could mean yes, no, or leave me alone until sunrise, and hope it's interpreted kindly. You grab the wooden ladle, worn, smooth, and definitely older than anyone currently alive, and stir the leftover porridge you smartly saved from last night. Nothing goes to waste here. Medieval cuisine is not built on glamour, it's built on efficiency, survival, and lowering expectations. Another quirky tidbit: some households believed that stirring the pot clockwise brought good fortune, while counterclockwise risked inviting mischief. You naturally stir clockwise. You do not need mischievous porridge today. The fire pops loudly, a tiny spark leaping dangerously. You jerk back slightly, heart skipping, and remind yourself that historians still argue whether medieval fires were more hazardous than we imagine, or whether modern people are just overly nervous around naked flames. Either way, you pull your sleeve back so it doesn't catch. You really don't need the excitement of extinguishing yourself before breakfast. The faint glow of dawn is creeping in through the cracks of the shutters, giving the room that soft, smoky haze that almost looks artistic. Almost. The smell, wood smoke, wool, damp straw, ruins the aesthetic a bit. Still, there's something soothing about hearing the fire sigh and settle as it warms the space, like it's waking up too. You lean forward, checking on the small ceramic jar nestled near the hearth's edge. It holds last night's milk or maybe ale. Depends on what your household prefers. Warmer drinks are easier on the stomach in the morning, and frankly, you deserve at least one moment of gentleness. You lift the jar, shake it softly. The liquid inside moves sluggishly, thick from the cold. It'll warm soon. Outside, someone's rooster finally remembers it has one job and belts out a scream that could wake the dead. You roll your eyes. Medieval alarms are loud, unpredictable, and cannot be snoozed. You mutter something unflattering under your breath, but quietly, because according to some superstitions, insulting animals before dawn brings bad luck. You're not risking that. You stand and stretch your back, feeling that familiar morning stiffness loosen slightly. The smell of the fire deepens, rich and earthy. You're aware of how fragile this warmth is, just a few ashes and twigs standing between comfort and misery. You mentally note to gather more fuel later. The woodpile is never full enough, especially in cold seasons. If you run out, congratulations. You get to spend the night shivering and explaining to everyone why their bedroom is now the inside of a refrigerator. The porridge begins to bubble gently, releasing steam that warms your face. You let yourself enjoy it for a heartbeat. A heartbeat is all you get. Behind you, the household stirs more aggressively now. Someone coughs. Someone yawns dramatically as if their sleep was a heroic feat. A child whimpers. A man grunts. You hear the soft thump of bare feet on the floor. You exhale slowly. The peace is almost gone. You ladle a bit of warm porridge into a small wooden bowl, testing the heat with your fingertip. Burned tongue equals ruined morning. Satisfied, you set it aside. A cat darts past you, hoping for scraps, tail high and shamelessly demanding. You nudge it away gently. Cats are working animals, technically, controlling rodents around the food stores. They know it. They act like they own the place. The fire dances brighter, and for a moment the house glows in warm amber light. It softens rough wood, smooths hard edges, makes even worn tools look gentle. You savour that fleeting beauty before the day sweeps you into more demanding tasks. Outside, the light intensifies. The sky is shifting through shades of pearly grey, pale blue, then something close to gold. It's your signal. The true morning is arriving, bringing expectations with it. You stir the pot one last time. You straighten your shoulders. You accept your fate. The hearth is alive now, warm, glowing, steady, and so are you. You step outside with the empty bucket in hand, feeling the morning air wrap around you like a damp cloak. It's cooler than you expected, the kind of chill that sneaks under your clothes and politely refuses to leave. But you're used to it. Every medieval woman is used to it. Water hauling is as routine as breathing, except breathing doesn't require lugging heavy wooden containers through mud before breakfast. Your boots sink slightly into the earth as you walk, the ground still soft from last night's dew. A faint mist clings low to the fields, giving everything that eerie, half-unreal glow that would make a great opening shot for a fantasy film. Except there's no magic here, just chores. You pass the sleeping animals in their pens. One of the cows flicks an ear at you with judgmental precision. Even the livestock know you're behind schedule. The village is waking slowly, with shutters creaking open and smoke starting to rise from a few chimneys. A dog trots by, tail wagging like it has big news but forgot what it was. Somewhere in the distance, someone is already shouting about bread. Medieval mornings, a symphony of mild chaos. Your bucket bumps rhythmically against your leg as you walk toward the well, unless you're unlucky enough to live somewhere without one, in which case congratulations, you get to fetch water from a stream even farther away. Today you picture a well, sturdy and stone-lined, sitting at the centre of the village like a communal treasure chest of hydration. When you arrive, a couple of other women are already there, leaning over the well's edge, rope in hand. They nod in greeting. No one's had enough sleep to talk yet. You return the nod with equal enthusiasm, which is to say barely any. A mainstream historical fact slips into your mind. In much of medieval Europe, hauling water was overwhelmingly women's work, done multiple times a day, often from significant distances. No clean tap, no helpful plumbing, just your own endurance and whatever rope hasn't frayed itself into retirement yet. One of the women grunts as she pulls up a brimming bucket, water sloshing dangerously near the rim. She pours it into her wooden pail with practiced ease. You step forward and take your turn, gripping the rope and lowering it. The pulley groans like it's also tired of doing its job, and honestly, you sympathise. When the bucket hits the water with a satisfying splash, you pause a moment. The surface ripples, reflecting a warped version of your face. You look tired. Everyone looks tired. That's medieval life in a nutshell. You haul the bucket up, every lift reminding you that your arms should absolutely be more muscular by now. You promise yourself you'll start training tomorrow, fully aware that medieval tomorrows never lighten the workload enough for that. You finally reach the top, muscles trembling, and pour the water into your container. A splash hits your shoes. You sigh. At least it's clean water. Well, clean-ish. One of the other women clears her throat, leaning in slightly. She whispers a quirky tidbit. Apparently, if you toss a pinch of salt into the well, it keeps mischievous spirits from spoiling the water. You glance at her, unsure whether she believes it or is just trying to lighten the monotony. She shrugs. Doesn't hurt, she mutters. So, you decide to consider it mentally, even though salt is way too valuable to be scattering into wells like confetti. As you hoist your now full bucket, a thought crosses your mind. Historians still argue whether wells were social hubs or daily nuisances. Some say women treated them like the medieval version of a coffee shop, chatting, trading news, bonding. Others say the labour was so exhausting no one had spare breath for gossip. Judging by the silence this morning, you're leaning toward the second group. The trek back is slower because now you're carrying the liquid equivalent of a baby elephant. Every step is a negotiation with gravity. Your shoulders ache, your hands ache, even your ankles have opinions about this workload. You adjust your grip, praying the bucket handles don't snap. Medieval handles have a terrible sense of humour. A few villagers pass you, an older man with a bundle of sticks, a boy chasing a chicken that absolutely does not want to be caught. Two girls skipping with surprising energy. You envy them for exactly 3 seconds before you remember they'll also be hauling water in a few years. Halfway home, you pause to rest, setting the bucket down gently. And by gently, you mean dropping it with a soft grunt. You shake out your hands. The skin on your palms is already rough, hardened by years of friction and cold air. Gloves? Absolutely. They exist. But they're precious, handmade, and rarely used for something as routine as water carrying. Priorities. You lift the bucket again, adjusting your stance, and continue walking. The weight feels like it doubles with each step, but the sight of your home growing closer gives you a tiny spark of determination. You remind yourself that this water isn't just for drinking. It's for cooking, cleaning, brewing, boiling linens, washing hands before meals, scrubbing tools, and occasionally putting out small fires. Because medieval kitchens love drama. Finally, you cross your threshold and place the bucket beside the hearth with a dull thud. Your arms feel like noodles, your back complains loudly, but you made it, again. Inside, the fire glows warmly. Someone calls your name in a tone that suggests more work is incoming. You glance at the bucket, at your hands, at the endless list of tasks you haven't even started yet. Welcome to the daily water routine. It's exhausting, repetitive, and absolutely essential. You wipe your brow, inhale deeply, and move toward the next responsibility. Because the day isn't waiting for you. It never does. You set the water aside, flexing your fingers like you're preparing for a medieval arm wrestling competition, which, honestly, you'd probably win at this point. But there's no time for daydreaming. The household is stirring properly now, boots scuffing, voices rising, doors creaking, children fussing. That means one thing: food prep. Endless, relentless, soul-shaping food prep. You move toward the rough wooden table, still scarred from years of chopping, kneading, spilling, and the occasional child deciding it's a drum. You place your palms on its surface, inhaling deeply as you take in the aromas lingering from yesterday. A hint of smoke, a whisper of herbs, and maybe a memory of onions that still cling like distant regrets. The pot of water near the fire is warming already. Good. You need it. Bread won't make itself, and porridge only buys you an hour of peace before someone asks what's for the next meal. Medieval cooking is less 3 meals a day, and more, you're perpetually making the next one. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Most medieval women spent several hours daily preparing food, grinding grain, kneading dough, stirring pots, and managing whatever ingredients the season bothered to offer. There's no pantry stocked with spices or a fridge full of choices. There's just you, your grinding stone, and your questionable relationship with barley. You pick up the quern, the 2 heavy circular stones used for grinding grain. One sits flat, the other rotates with the help of a wooden handle. You pour a small amount of grain into the centre, set your jaw, and begin turning the top stone. It's the medieval equivalent of a gym workout, except no one cheers you on, and you don't get a protein shake afterward. The gritty grinding sound fills the room, a slow, droning rhythm as familiar as breathing. As the flour accumulates, dust floats through the sunlight leaking in from the cracks in the shutter, making the room feel almost magical, if you ignore the sweat on your forehead and the burning ache awakening in your arms. You blow a stray lock of hair out of your face and mutter something half sleepy, half sarcastic. The cat watches from a corner, clearly judging your technique. You pause for a moment, leaning on the handle. You think of something your neighbour told you once, a quirky tidbit. Some households believed that singing while grinding grain helped the flour come out finer and the bread rise better. Does it work? Probably not. Will you do it anyway? Maybe. Anything to break the monotony. You hum a few notes under your breath. The cat flicks its tail in disapproval. Tough crowd. You continue grinding, letting the rhythm lull you into that strange meditative state, where your mind drifts across tasks without fully leaving your body. People sometimes imagine medieval kitchens as bustling, chaotic spaces, but in homes like yours, they're places of repetition and quiet concentration. Except when someone barges in, which right on cue, someone does. A small child tugs on your sleeve. You glance down, wide eyes, sticky hands. A request for breakfast you already knew was coming. You sigh, gently redirect the child toward the simmering porridge, and speak in a tone that roughly translates to, "Give me 1 minute unless the house is on fire." The child nods, then immediately ignores your request and starts poking things. Fantastic. You brush flour from your hands and move to knead dough. You mix the freshly ground flour with water and a bit of yesterday's sourdough starter, kept carefully wrapped and tucked near the hearth overnight. It smells tangy and alive in a way that modern yeast packets could never compete with. You plunge your hands into the mixture, pushing, folding, stretching, repeating. The dough grows smooth under your palms, gradually warming to your touch. As you knead, your mind wanders again. You think of the way historians still argue whether medieval bread was more nutritious than what we eat today. Some claim the grain varieties were richer, while others point out the stones from the quern often left tiny bits of grit in the flour, slowly grinding people's teeth down over time. Lovely. Add unintentional dental sanding to your daily routine. Once the dough is shaped, you place it near the fire to rise, because ovens, if you have access at all, are usually communal. Later, you'll carry the dough to the village bakehouse, where all the women gather to use the single hot oven while trading gossip, rumours and complaints about their husbands snoring. Speaking of fire, you turn back to the pot and lift the lid, letting a cloud of steam fog your face. You stir the porridge with practiced motions, watching it thicken. It smells comforting, plain, and just nutritious enough to keep everyone upright. You ladle some into bowls, passing them out to whoever wanders in demanding sustenance. Someone tries to complain about the flavour. You raise an eyebrow. They immediately reconsider their complaint. You are the undisputed queen of breakfast, and they know it. With everyone eating, you take a moment to tidy the table. You wipe down the surface, shoo away the cat again, and gather stray grain kernels that have, for reasons unknown, spread themselves across the entire room. Outside, the sun finally rises fully, golden light slipping through the cracks in the walls. The world is warming slightly, though you know it won't last. You grab a small sack of leftover herbs, crush a bit between your fingers, and sprinkle them into the simmering pot for later. A tiny act of culinary rebellion. As you survey the kitchen, fire glowing, dough rising, grain ground, porridge served, you feel that strange, subtle flicker of satisfaction. This is the invisible work that keeps everyone alive. No praise, no applause, no breaks, but steady, life-giving, essential. You wipe your hands on your apron, take a breath, and move on. There's always something waiting. You wipe your hands on your apron, again, and step toward the corner where today's mountain of mending sits like a patient but judgmental friend. Clothing in medieval life isn't about fashion. It's about survival, warmth, and how long you can keep something from literally falling apart. You settle onto your stool with the kind of sigh that only someone who sees loose seams in their sleep can make. Your fingers reach for a tunic with a tear near the hem, a rip probably caused by someone who absolutely swore they would be careful this time. You thread a bone needle, smooth, pale, and slightly curved from years of use. Threading it is a feat of patience. The lighting in the house isn't exactly kind to fine vision. Sunlight filters in through cracks in the shutters, making soft beams in the dusty air, but it's hardly perfect sewing light. You pull the thread through with a gentle tug, feeling the fibres tighten. The fabric is rough wool, sturdy but not immortal, dyed in one of those honest medieval shades. Brownish brown, slightly different brown, or an ambitious grey. You begin to stitch carefully, the repetitive motion soothing despite the ache already forming in your hands. The thread glides through the fabric, up and down, forming neat little rows that no one will ever properly appreciate, except maybe other women who spend their lives doing the same. A mainstream historical fact pops into your mind. Medieval women were responsible for nearly all domestic textile work: spinning, weaving, sewing, mending, essentially controlling the entire life cycle of clothing. In many places, spinning alone consumed hours every day. And guess what? You'll be spinning later. Again. You glance at the spindle resting on the table, its whirl smooth and familiar. It waits like a little wooden reminder that your workload is never done. Before you dive into spinning, though, you finish the tunic, tie a firm knot and hold it up. The repair is nearly invisible. You allow yourself a tiny private moment of pride before tossing it onto the finished pile, currently consisting of only one item. But hey, progress. You reach for the next garment, a hole in a child's stocking worn down from endless running, climbing, and ignoring every instruction to stay clean. You sigh, begin stitching, and hear giggles from outside, the exact culprit sprinting past the window. You make a mental note to pretend you didn't see that. Halfway through the mend, a neighbour pokes her head in, greeting you with the medieval equivalent of "Can I borrow something?" She needs a bit of thread, hers ran out, and the merchant only comes once a week. You hand her a small bundle. She promises to bring you a few eggs later in return. Bartering between women is the unofficial backbone of the entire village economy. You don't even think twice about it. As she leaves, she mentions a quirky tidbit. Some people believe that mending clothes during a rainstorm brings good luck to the family. Something about washing sorrows away. You raise an eyebrow. It's not raining now, so either your luck is holding steady, or you're missing your chance to improve it. Hard to say. Once the neighbour disappears, you finally pick up the spindle. The wool, freshly carded, is soft, fluffy, and slightly stubborn. You twist a bit between your fingers, setting the spindle spinning as the fibres lengthen into thin, continuous thread. The movement is rhythmic, hypnotic, and just slow enough to remind you you'll be doing this forever. Thread accumulates around the spindle in a delicate spiral. You lean back slightly, letting your body follow the rhythm. There is something peaceful here, if you tilt your mind in the right direction. While spinning, you ponder one of those open scholarly debates. Historians still argue whether medieval women found textile work empowering or exhausting. Some say it granted women significant economic influence. Others insist it was a burden that dominated their lives. You sit somewhere in the middle. Your hands ache, but the thread slipping through your fingers feels like something you control in a world where very little belongs to you. A child wanders in, holding up a cloak with a sheepish expression. Another tear. You close your eyes briefly, not in anger, just resignation, then pat the child on the head and set the cloak aside for later. You'll fix it. You always do. The spindle slows, thread complete. You unwind it carefully, place it with the rest of the new yarn, and allow yourself to stretch. Your back cracks loudly, loud enough that the cat startles and gives you a betrayed look. You mutter an apology to your own spine. It deserved better. You return to sewing, picking up a worn apron with a hole near the hem. Your needle dips and rises, fabric pulling against your fingers with that familiar tug. You stitch in silence for a while, then hum softly, a tune you don't quite remember learning but somehow know by heart. Outside, the village is fully awake. You hear distant chatter, the thud of tools, the bleating of goats, the creak of wagon wheels. The smell of someone else's cooking drifts in, reminding you that other women are following the same steps, the same motions, the same responsibilities. It's comforting, in a quietly collective way. You tie off the stitch, tuck away your needle, and place the mended apron on the pile. Another task done. Hundreds more remain. But that's how today works. That's how every day works. You pick up the spindle again, preparing for another long stretch of spinning. You settle your body, you settle your breathing, and you work. You barely set the spindle down before you hear the familiar chorus of small voices, some arguing, some laughing, one definitely crying, and at least one trying to negotiate with reality in a way reality will not accept. Children, your children, someone else's, children, all the children. In a world with no childcare centres, no quiet time, and absolutely no screens to distract anyone, managing little humans is an all-day, full-body, deep-breathing exercise. You stand, brushing stray wool fibres from your apron, and step outside to find the source of the crying. It takes you about 2 seconds. A small child stands beside a wooden bucket, looking betrayed by the laws of physics after clearly tripping over it. You kneel, check for injuries, just bruised pride, and give a reassuring pat. The crying fades into sniffles. One crisis averted, thousands to go. A mainstream historical fact floats through your mind. Medieval women were primary caregivers not just for their own children, but often for nieces, nephews, neighbours' children, and younger siblings. Households were large, busy, and communal. Responsibility rarely stopped at the edge of your own family. You don't just raise a child, you help raise the village. You usher the sniffly child toward the house and glance around, noticing the other little ones performing their usual morning mischief. One child pokes a stick into the ground as if digging for treasure. Another waves a cloth like it's a banner of impending revolution. A toddler waddles determinedly toward a goat that is absolutely not in the mood for visitors. And there you go, your next rescue mission. You scoop up the toddler just before the goat expresses its displeasure with an enthusiastic headbutt. The toddler laughs, you do not. You mutter something equivalent to "not today," and the goat gives you a look that suggests this may not be over. Inside the house, breakfast bowls sit half-finished on the table. You guide the children back inside, urging them to eat. Encouraging medieval children to sit still is like trying to convince a bored crow not to steal shiny objects. You gently tap a wooden spoon against the table. They sit. Miracles do happen. As they eat, you move around the room, keeping an eye on everyone. You tidy, wipe, gather, straighten, never fully stopping, never fully resting. Caregiving isn't one task. It's 50 tiny tasks happening all at once. And you do all of them. You begin sorting small chores for the older kids. Fetch a bundle of firewood, gather herbs from the edge of the garden, fill the chicken feeder. Children contribute early here. Survival depends on every pair of hands, no matter how small. Most kids know their responsibilities by age 4 or 5. Childhood is short, practical, and structured by necessity. While you oversee their little missions, your mind flicks to a quirky bit of folklore. Some mothers believed tying a red thread around a child's wrist protected them from envious spirits. You've seen neighbours do it. You've maybe done it yourself once or twice. Not because you're superstitious. No, of course not. But because sometimes you take comfort wherever you can find it. The kids return with their assigned items. Some, more triumphantly than others. One brings exactly 2 herbs and a rock, beaming with confidence. You thank them anyway. Praise fuels them better than porridge sometimes. You organise the supplies while glancing outside. A few women are walking through the village with little ones strapped to their backs, their hips, their shoulders, whichever configuration keeps the child contained. One woman calls out a greeting. You wave back. There's a camaraderie among mothers and caretakers that transcends language, culture, and century. You feel it now, a quiet thread tying you to all of them. Inside, a child suddenly announces, "I'm bored." You inhale sharply. Boredom is dangerous. Boredom leads to climbing shelves, poking embers, and trying to pet chickens that would rather not be touched. You redirect quickly, offering them the thrilling opportunity to sort dried peas by size. Their little face lights up with surprising enthusiasm, crisis successfully diverted. You move to the doorway, checking the sky. Weather matters. Storms mean more time indoors, which means more chaos. Today looks calm, though. You shepherd the older children outside to play within eyesight. Games are simple. Tag, pebble toss, imaginary adventures involving dragons made of tree branches. They make their own joy, raw and loud and slightly feral. Meanwhile, a baby starts fussing in a cradle. You step inside, leaning over the small wooden frame. You sway gently, humming a soft tune. The baby calms, eyelids fluttering, breath tiny and warm. You feel a rare moment of stillness, a soft hush settling over you like a fragile blessing. As you rock the cradle, your thoughts drift to one of those academic debates. Historians still argue whether medieval childhood was tender and protected, or harsh and rushed. Some evidence suggests children received affectionate care. Other sources describe a world with little room for nurturing. You feel the tension of both ideas. Life is hard, yes, but your hands are gentle. Your care is real. A loud crash interrupts your moment. You turn sharply. 2 children have knocked over a basket of firewood and are now explaining that it fell by itself. You give them a look seasoned with ancient maternal wisdom. They immediately begin restacking the logs with deeply suspicious innocence. You continue supervising, refereeing disputes, offering comfort, preventing disasters, providing structure, and occasionally issuing that universal "don't even think about it" tone. You're not just managing children, you're raising future workers, future spouses, future contributors to the tiny economy that is your village. But more quietly, you're shaping their sense of safety, consistency, and belonging in a world that doesn't often offer softness. When the chaos dips to a manageable hum, you wipe your brow, feeling the weight of caregiving settle into your bones, not heavy, just constant. This is the part of daily life everyone relies on but rarely acknowledges. You bring the last child inside, closing the door gently behind you. Time to move to the next responsibility. The day waits for no one. You gather your cloak, thin, a little frayed at the edges but good enough, and step outside with your small basket tucked under your arm. Today is market day, which means you finally get to leave the house for something other than hauling water or corralling goats. Market days are the medieval version of getting out to touch grass, except the grass is usually mud, and the entire village shows up too. The path leading toward the market square is already lively. A couple of neighbours walk ahead of you, baskets swinging from their elbows. Someone's carrying a bundle of leeks larger than their torso. A flock of chickens scatters dramatically as a cart trundles past, wheels creaking at a pitch that could double as a medieval violin. You follow the flow of people toward the centre of the village. The market isn't grand, just a scattering of wooden stalls, blankets spread on the ground, and carts loaded with goods. But to you, it feels like stepping into a tiny world where money, barter, rumour and opportunity all swirl together like a pot of stew that never stops simmering. As you approach, smells hit you first. Baked bread, smoked fish, herbs hanging in bundles, and something fried that you absolutely can't afford but really want to buy anyway. You inhale deeply, letting the scents settle into your mind. This is the closest you'll get to medieval aromatherapy. You weave between stalls, examining goods. You're not here with coins, most women aren't, but your basket holds eggs, thread, and a bit of dried fruit to barter with. Money is for taxes, not daily exchanges. Besides, bartering lets you feel like a strategic negotiator, until someone's toddler tries to take your eggs, in which case the negotiation gets very one-sided. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Local markets were essential in medieval life, especially for women. They were one of the few socially acceptable spaces where women could interact widely, sell goods, gather news, and exert small but meaningful economic influence. Some women even ran their own market stalls trading produce or handicrafts, micro-entrepreneurs long before anyone invented the term. You stop at a table covered with vegetables, carrots, beans, onions shaped like medieval teardrops. The woman behind the stall nods at you knowingly. You greet her and place 2 eggs in your palm. She eyes them, then your face, then the carrots you're clearly interested in. She tilts her head like she's debating whether you look desperate enough to accept fewer carrots. You raise an eyebrow. She cracks first, adding 1 more carrot to the pile. You exchange goods, both of you claiming victory internally. This is the art of the market. Small, subtle battles where everyone pretends to be slightly poorer than they are. You stroll onward, basket filling slowly. Children weave through the crowd like loose arrows, shrieking with excitement. A man selling honey shouts that his bees are the gentlest in the county, which is probably a lie, but it's great advertising. Another merchant offers ribbons dyed in bright colours. You pause at the ribbons. Blue, red, a particularly bold yellow. You run your fingers across them, imagining wearing one braided into your hair. A whisper of longing stirs. But the price? Far beyond your means. You step back, telling yourself you didn't really want it anyway. It's fine. Totally fine. A woman approaches you then, lowering her voice as she glances around. Here it comes, gossip, the true currency of market day. She tells you that the miller's wife swears she saw lights by the forest last night, and someone else heard wolves, but maybe it wasn't wolves, and also the village down the road had their entire cabbage patch eaten by something that definitely wasn't rabbits. You nod thoughtfully, absorbing every word. You'll pass this along later, not because you're nosy, though maybe a little, but because sharing news is how the community stays connected. Medieval life is basically one long neighbourhood watch meeting with better storytelling. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind as you chat. Some people believe that market gossip could directly influence luck. Speak well of you, good fortune follows. Speak ill, and you're inviting misfortune. Whether you believe that or not, you choose your words carefully. Gossip may be entertainment, but it's also strategy. You drift toward the far corner of the market where the noise is loudest. A man is loudly advertising live eels, squirming in a bucket like slippery serpents planning their escape. You steer far, far away. You do not want an eel in your basket, life, or nightmares. Near the centre of the square, a small crowd gathers around a travelling vendor. He's selling small trinkets, wooden combs, clay beads, cheap knives, little charms shaped like animals. He holds up a carved wooden whistle and announces that it keeps evil spirits away. Several women exchange sceptical looks. A child begs their mother for it. You watch with mild amusement as the mother gives in, knowing full well she'll regret buying a toy that can produce noise. You continue browsing. You trade dried fruit for a pouch of herbs. You swap a bit of thread for a small wedge of cheese. Each exchange is quick, practiced, almost musical. You feel more connected here than almost anywhere else. Markets are woven into the rhythm of your week, a reminder that you belong to a wider web of people, labour, and stories. Near the end of your round, you overhear two older women debating something, voices low but intense. You catch a fragment. Historians still argue whether, followed by a reference to last year's famine, and whether better storage could have prevented it. You smile faintly at the phrasing. Even centuries before historians exist as a profession, villagers are already arguing like historians. Your basket is nearly full now, heavier than when you arrived, but much more satisfying to carry. You take one last look around. The bustle, the chatter, the negotiating, the smells mixing in the air like a chaotic perfume. Market day is exhausting, yes, but it's also a rare doorway into the larger world. One small step outside the endless cycle of home and chores. You head back toward your house, the path quieter now. Behind you, the market hum continues like a distant heartbeat. You adjust your basket, straighten your shoulders, and keep walking. There are still tasks waiting at home. There are always tasks. You reach home with your basket of market treasures, but the moment you step through the doorway, you're reminded that peace is a luxury reserved for people who don't live in medieval villages. The fire needs tending, the children are arguing over something that almost certainly doesn't matter, and someone has moved your tools to a location that defies all logic. You inhale, slow, steady, and then you head back outside. Because today isn't just about your household. Today, like so many days, includes communal work, the shared labour that binds the village together, whether through necessity, cooperation, or the simple fact that refusing to help makes people talk about you for months. You walk toward the edge of the fields, where a cluster of women has already gathered. Some carry baskets, others tools, a few have toddlers clinging to their skirts like determined barnacles. You join them, nodding in greeting. No one has the energy to make a big fuss. You're all here for the same reason, work that can't be done alone. A mainstream historical fact anchors your thoughts. Medieval villages relied heavily on communal labour, especially tasks like gleaning leftover grain after harvest, maintaining hedges, repairing paths, sharing ovens, or herding animals across common land. Women were central to this network of cooperation. If the village was a machine, women were the gears keeping it from seizing up. Today's focus, gleaning. The harvest ended days ago, leaving scattered stalks, stray heads of grain, and dried plants that can still be salvaged. It's painstaking, slow work, bending, picking, shaking out seeds, but gleaning is vital. For some families, it's the difference between making it through winter and going hungry. You set your basket down and begin. Kneel, pluck, stand, move, repeat. The rhythm settles into your joints like a familiar tune. It's quiet work, except for the breeze rustling dry stalks and the occasional sigh from someone remembering exactly how much they dislike this task. As you pick through the remnants of the field, you hear a pair of women chatting nearby. They're debating whether the harvest was as good as the miller claimed. One insists it was. The other mutters that historians still argue whether millers ever tell the truth, which earns a round of muffled snickers. Millers are the medieval equivalent of suspiciously charming accountants. You need them, but you never fully trust them. The sun warms your back as you gather grain into your basket. A tiny beetle crawls across a stalk, pausing as if to judge your technique before scampering off. The ground is hard in places, cracked in others. Your knees complain. Your hands complain. Your soul complains. But this is survival, not preference. A few yards away, a group of older children works together, combing the field efficiently. Younger kids wander around collecting pebbles, handfuls of grass, and imaginary treasure. One girl proudly shows you a rock, shaped vaguely like a potato. You admire it with the enthusiasm of someone who knows appreciation fuels small hearts. After an hour of gleaning, your basket begins to fill with golden bits of grain, messy, uneven, but hard-earned. You wipe sweat from your forehead, leaving a smear of dust across your cheek. Everyone working looks the same, sun-flushed, determined, slightly exhausted but moving anyway. Next on the communal list, the hedgerow. You all shift to the overgrown boundary near the lane, where brambles tangle together like nature's barbed wire. Keeping these trimmed prevents animals from escaping, neighbours from arguing, and carts from getting inconveniently scraped. You grab a hooked knife and start cutting, pulling branches aside carefully. Thorns snag your sleeves, your gloves, if you're lucky enough to have any, and occasionally your dignity. You mutter something impolite at the hedge. It does not apologise. A quirky tidbit slips into your mind. Some people believed that trimming hedges at the wrong time of the year angered woodland spirits, who would retaliate by making tools break or animals fall ill. Today, no one mentions spirits, but everyone is working with just a little extra caution, just in case. Once the hedgerow is tamed, you join a few others at the sheep pasture. The flock needs guiding from one grazing patch to another. You clap your hands, shout a bit, wave your apron like an unimpressive flag. The sheep look at you with blank expressions, fluffy, confused, deeply unimpressed. One trots in the wrong direction on purpose. You redirect it. Another tries to nibble your basket. You defend your gleanings like you're protecting state secrets. Eventually, through collective herding and mild chaos, the flock gets where it's supposed to go. You wipe your brow again, starting to feel the ache in your shoulders. Communal tasks wind down slowly. One woman ties up bundles of kindling for families to share. Another hands out leftover herbs from her garden. Someone's teenage son appears with a wheelbarrow full of manure for fertilizing. And the speed at which everyone suddenly steps back is impressive. As the group breaks apart, you trade a few words with an elder who remembers leaner years. She tells you, half serious, half joking, that good communal work keeps the village on the right side of fate. No one survives alone, she says, and she's right. Medieval life is group survival, disguised as individual responsibility. With your gleaned grain, your scratched arms, and your tired but steady steps, you start heading home. The path winds between houses, chickens, and a very smug-looking goat. You squint at it suspiciously. It squints back. Your basket feels heavier than when you left, but in a satisfying way. Today's labour might not be glamorous, but it's shared. That makes it bearable, maybe even meaningful. You step inside your home again, placing the basket carefully on the table. Communal work is done. Now it's time for everything waiting inside. You slip back into your home, basket set aside, arms aching in that familiar, dependable way. Communal work is done, but the day hasn't slowed down. It rarely does. Instead, your mind drifts, just for a moment, to the part of life that shapes everything else around you. Marriage, roles, expectations, the invisible script you're expected to follow line by line, even when you're tired enough to sleep standing up. You hang your cloak, smoothing it down. The fabric is thin from years of wear, just like so many of the expectations placed on you. Old, frayed, but still firmly in place. You pause at the table, brushing the dust from your hands. Marriage in medieval life isn't romantic at all, at least not in the modern sense. It's practical, economic, strategic. And whether you married for family arrangements, property concerns, or simply because two households needed an extra pair of hands merged into one, your role inside that union is already written long before the wedding feast ends. A mainstream historical fact echoes in your mind. Marriage among common folk was typically less about love and more about labour, survival, and alliances between families. Women's labour, your labour, is one of the greatest assets you bring. Not your personality, not your dreams, not your taste in ribbons, your ability to work. You move toward the hearth, banking the fire out of habit while your thoughts continue drifting. You remember your wedding day, The food, the laughter, the dancing, the slightly questionable ale, and the way older women whispered advice to you in riddles you only half understood. A good marriage keeps the house upright, one had said, but a good woman keeps it warm. At the time, you weren't sure if she meant emotionally or literally, since you spend your whole life tending the fire. The rhythm of the household pulls you back into motion. Someone calls your name. Your husband, probably. He steps in from outside, smelling faintly of earth, sweat, and livestock. Not unpleasant, just unmistakably medieval. He gives you that nod of acknowledgement shared between spouses who have been working non-stop since dawn. Neither of you has the energy for small talk yet. In your marriage, like most, responsibilities fall along traditional lines. You manage the home, the food, the children, the fire, the clothing. He works the fields, repairs tools, handles heavy labour. But those lines aren't as rigid as people think. If a task needs doing, you both do it, just with different socially approved labels attached. Sometimes you help with the harvest. Sometimes he watches the children. Sometimes both of you do everything at once, because that's what survival looks like. You sit for a moment, just a moment, on the bench, stretching your back. Your husband sits across from you, scrubbing dirt from his hands. It's quiet enough to hear the soft pop of the fire and the rustle of the children playing outside. It feels peaceful until someone screams. Not a painful scream, just the "my sibling stole my stick" kind of scream. You both sigh in unison. That's marriage too. Your mind wanders toward the roles women inhabit even beyond their homes, the unspoken rules, the expectations, the ever-watchful eyes of neighbours who measure worth by how smoothly you run your household, or how poorly you don't. You're always being evaluated, subtly, silently. Medieval womanhood is a performance with no intermissions. A quirky tidbit drifts into memory. Some people believed that a woman's skill at weaving or spinning predicted her marriage success. If you tangled a thread, bad omen, perfect yarn, good fortune. Completely unfair, of course. But superstition loves to hold women accountable for everything. Rain, spoiled bread, clumsy husbands. You glance at your spindle on the table and smirk. Plenty of tangled threads there. Yet here you are, still keeping the house upright and your sanity mostly intact. As you stand again, your thoughts flicker to one of those open, scholarly debates. Historians still argue whether medieval marriages were oppressive structures for women or cooperative partnerships shaped by shared hardship. Records show both. Marriages full of affection and marriages full of tension. Couples who truly supported each other and couples who are human cautionary tales. You feel the ambiguity deeply. Your marriage is real, imperfect, but functional. There are moments of quiet teamwork, moments of friction, and countless moments where you both simply endure. Your husband steps back outside to finish repairing a fence, and you return to your indoor domain, your sphere of influence, your responsibility, your kingdom and cage all at once. You stir the pot simmering on the hearth, taste the broth, adjust the flavour with a pinch of herbs from the market. You check on the younger children. You fold a tunic on the table. Life isn't glamorous, but it's steady, predictable, necessary. As the afternoon light softens into something warm and dusty, you hear footsteps behind you. Your husband returns holding a small wooden token. Smoothly carved, simple, maybe a little crooked. He hands it to you awkwardly, like he's not sure what to say. A charm, a trinket he made. Not much, but something. You feel a flicker of warmth in your chest. In a life shaped by obligation, these tiny gestures matter more than grand declarations ever could. You tuck the charm into your apron pocket with a quiet nod. Marriage, you think, isn't just duty. It's the small, almost invisible ways people make each other's days a little more bearable. You look toward the doorway where the light is fading, the day is moving on, and so must you. You move toward the shelf where your small collection of herbs, bundles, jars, and slightly suspicious dried plants hangs like an apothecary curated by someone who learned medicine from equal parts experience and hearsay. In medieval life, health isn't a matter of appointments or prescriptions. It's a balancing act between remedies, rituals, and sheer stubborn willpower. And today, someone in your household is coughing again, which means your role as caretaker expands into something closer to unofficial village nurse. You gather a few sprigs of thyme, some dried chamomile, and a dented clay cup. You toss the herbs in and pour warm water from the pot, watching the steam coil upward like curling silver. The smell is soothing, earthy, gentle, familiar. You cradle the cup between your hands for a moment before carrying it to the corner where one of the children sits with glassy eyes and a runny nose. You press the cup into their hands and settle beside them. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind. Medieval healthcare relied heavily on women. Mothers, midwives, herbalists and wise women were the backbone of community wellness, long before formal physicians were available, or affordable, for common people. A physician in a nearby town might know Latin and quote ancient texts, but he probably won't visit your cottage unless someone's wealthy or very, very sick. Most everyday ailments fall to you. You check the child's forehead with the back of your hand, warm but not frighteningly so. You wipe their nose, fuss with their hair, and murmur something soft that works better than any medicine. They lean into you, comforted by your presence more than the herbs. You allow yourself a small smile. These are the moments that make the chaos survivable. Once the child is settled, you turn back to the shelf. Hanging from it are bundles of rosemary, mint, lavender, and a few things you keep only because someone swore they work even though you're 80% sure they don't. Dried nettles, a jar of honey, a small cloth bag filled with crushed willow bark, the medieval version of aspirin. You rub your hands together, deciding what needs replenishing. You grab the bundle of lavender and inhale deeply. Its sharp, clean scent cuts through the smoky air. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. Some midwives believed lavender sprinkled near a woman in labour kept evil spirits away from the birthing chamber. Whether that's true is questionable, whether lavender helps with stress. That you know firsthand. You hear footsteps outside and turn just in time to see a woman from the village entering your home with a basket of eggs. She places them on the table with a tired smile. "Trade," she says. In return, she asks if you can look at a rash on her youngest child. You gesture for her to sit. The child's rash is angry and red. You tilt their chin, examining the patchy skin while listening to the mother describe when it appeared. You sift through. Mental notes. Was it the weather? New wool clothing? Something they ate? You're not trained, not officially a healer, but knowledge in this world passes through women's hands. Remedies are inherited like heirlooms. You crush a bit of mint, mix it with honey, and apply it gently to the rash. The child flinches, then relaxes. You tell the mother to keep the child away from smoke and to rinse the area with warm water tonight. She nods, clutching your wrist gratefully before heading home. You watch her leave, feeling a ripple of pride. You're not a healer by title, but people trust you. Sometimes that's more important than credentials. Your thoughts drift toward childbirth, the domain of midwives, one of the few roles where women wield unquestioned authority. You remember the last birth in the village, the tense hours filled with whispered prayers, boiling water, and the midwife's steady voice guiding the mother through pain. Midwives hold immense responsibility, yet their work straddles the line between medicine and folklore. This thought leads you into one of those scholarly debates. Historians still argue whether medieval midwives were respected experts or feared practitioners accused of witchcraft. The truth, as usual, sits somewhere in between. They were invaluable, sometimes revered, sometimes resented, occasionally scapegoated when things went wrong. You respect them deeply. You also fear them a tiny bit, especially when they glare. You move back to the hearth and stir the simmering pot. Inside, you've added herbs earlier, thyme and a pinch of garlic, to strengthen its restorative warmth. The aroma fills the house like a comforting blanket. You pour a small ladleful into a wooden bowl for yourself. You rarely treat your own health seriously, but today the ache behind your eyes tells you to pause. You sit on the bench, sipping slowly. The warmth spreads down your throat, settling in your chest. You close your eyes for a moment. Just a moment. The steam softens the world around you. But medieval life rarely allows long moments. A loud thump comes from the doorway. When you look up, your husband stands there holding a splintered tool handle and wearing a sheepish expression. "Need it fixed," he mutters. You raise an eyebrow, tapping the bowl lightly. He glances down, understanding. "After you finish," he adds. "Progress." You set the bowl aside and inspect the broken handle. A clean break. Nothing too dramatic. While you study it, he sits across from you, rubbing his temples. You offer him a small piece of willow bark. He hesitates, then accepts. Even if he doesn't believe in remedies the way women do, he believes in your judgment. You gather a few more herbs, tie them into a bundle and hang them near the fire to dry. Your hands move confidently, almost automatically now. Every gesture feels rooted in countless days of similar work. Remedies, midwifery, first aid, soothing, cleaning, diagnosing. It's all woven into the endless tapestry of your responsibilities. Health in this world isn't a straight line. It's a web, a fragile one, and you are one of the hands holding it together. The fire cracks softly. The child with the runny nose snores from their pallet. Outside, the sun dips lower, casting a warm glow through the shutters. You rise, ready for the next need, the next request, the next quiet act of care. Because tending a household means tending the bodies inside it, day after day. You stand and stretch your back, easing the stiffness that has settled into your shoulders. Late afternoon light filters into the house in long, slanted beams, dust drifting lazily through them like tiny golden spirits. It's the time of day when your tasks shift from physical labour to something quieter, deeper, woven into the rhythm of faith and the sacred cycles that shape everyone's lives, whether they're devoted believers or just trying not to fall asleep during long sermons. You step outside and feel the sun warming your face. The village bell rings in the distance, not the grand tolling of a cathedral, but a humble, slightly off-key clang-a-ling that tells everyone it's time for evening prayers. Not mandatory, not enforced, but strongly expected. Medieval communities run on shared belief, shared routine, shared ritual. It holds everything together like invisible thread. You call the children, dust them off, attempt to make them look less like they've been wrestling in a ditch, because they have, and start walking toward the small wooden chapel at the centre of the village. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your thoughts. The church shaped nearly every aspect of medieval life. Social roles, calendars, work schedules, gender expectations, even what you could or couldn't eat on a given day. For women especially, religious structures provided both comfort and constraint. You live inside those boundaries whether you think about them or not. As you walk, neighbours join you, forming a slow-moving cluster of villagers heading the same way. The chapel stands modestly beneath a pair of leaning trees. Candles flicker inside. Hymns drift through the open doorway, thin voices, slightly wavering, but earnest. You step in, dip your fingers in a wooden bowl of water, and cross yourself. The interior smells of wax, wood, and old flowers someone placed by the altar days ago. You find your usual spot, second bench on the left, close enough to hear, far enough to avoid being voluntold for something. The children settle beside you with varying levels of enthusiasm. One immediately fidgets. You give them the universal parental look of gentle threat. They stop. The priest begins speaking. His voice is steady, his robe a little wrinkled, his hair in that medieval "I tried" arrangement. He delivers a homily about humility, community, and working together. A message everyone here hears at least 100 times a year. Still it lands. Hard work, after all, is your entire existence. As you listen, your eyes wander across the chapel decorations, painted saints with earnest expressions, rough-hewn wooden beams wrapped in simple cloth, a small statue of Mary whose face holds equal measures of sorrow and serenity. A candle flickers below her feet, sputtering like it's gossiping with the flame next to it. Your mind drifts, gently, sleepily, toward the cycle of feast days that punctuate the year. Holy days are your rare breaks, your excuses to pause, eat something special, dress a little nicer, maybe even dance without feeling like you're neglecting something. Feast days are oxygen. You think of one recently past, a day when everyone walked in a long procession through the fields, singing hymns while sprinkling blessed water over the soil. The memory brings warmth to your chest, children giggling, women trading smiles, men trying to look solemn while tripping over uneven ground. A quirky tidbit slips in. Some villagers believed that ringing church bells during storms would protect them from lightning. Others thought bells scared away demons hiding in thunderclouds. Bells had more jobs than half the people in the village. The sermon winds down. People kneel, murmur prayers, rub their hands together for warmth. You bow your head, whispering your own quiet thoughts, not elaborate requests, just small, steady hopes. Health, safety, good harvest, enough food to last the winter, a moment of peace here and there. When the service ends, the chapel empties in a soft shuffle of feet and muted chatter. Outside, the fading sky paints the village in smooth tones of amber and violet. Neighbours linger, exchanging friendly words. The priest passes by, offering a tired smile. You realise even he looks exhausted, spiritually responsible for dozens of people who argue daily about chickens, grain weights, and whether last night's strange noise was a fox or a demon pretending to be a fox. Walking home, you feel lighter somehow. Maybe from prayer, maybe simply from the pause. Rituals do that. They give shape to time, soft edges to the day, and tiny reassurances that you're part of something larger. One of the older women joins you on the path and begins talking about next month's feast day preparations. Baking, singing, candle making, maybe a reenactment of a saint's story that usually involves someone pretending to be eaten by a lion. You smile politely. Medieval religious theatre is memorable, to put it kindly. Then she leans closer and whispers another tale, something half myth, half belief, that saints sometimes walk the village at night disguised as beggars, testing people's kindness. It's the sort of story children love and adults pretend not to take seriously, even though everyone secretly tries to be nicer at night just in case. As she talks, your mind drifts toward one of those scholarly debates again. Historians still argue whether medieval faith was deeply internal or simply social. Obligation? Was it true devotion? Cultural expectation? Practical survival? Or some blend of all three? You don't ponder it too deeply. Faith is just part of the air you breathe, like smoke, like the smell of flour on your hands. You reach your doorway again. The sky is dimming quickly. You step inside, closing the shutter. The house glows with firelight, warm and familiar. Ritual behind you, work still ahead. You exhale, settling back into the flow of your daily rhythm. Faith sits quietly in your chest, like a steady heartbeat guiding you onward. You close the shutter behind you and immediately feel the change in air. The house dimmer now, warmer against the growing chill outside. Evening is tugging at the edges of the sky, and with it comes that quiet reminder that every task you do is shaped by the seasons. In the medieval world, weather isn't background ambience. It's the boss. It decides what work you do, how hard you work, when you rest, and how much you worry while you pretend not to. You step toward the hearth and stir the pot, the steam rising gently. Your body finally has a moment to notice the day's aches. The tightness in your shoulders, the faint sting in your palms from earlier chores, the heaviness in your legs from walking, kneeling, standing, repeating. You rub your hands together, appreciating the fire's warmth, because depending on the season, that warmth can feel like a luxury or a desperate necessity. A mainstream historical fact floats in your mind. Medieval households structured their entire lives around the agricultural year. Seasons weren't decorative, they were survival schedules. Spring was planting, summer was relentless field labour, autumn was harvest and frantic preparation, and winter was endurance. You feel that rhythm in your bones, even when you try not to think about it. You glance at the door, imagining the world outside with its shifting colours and smells. In spring, the air would be thick with thawing earth and new shoots. In summer, the dust would cling to your ankles as you filled water buckets all day long. But today it's the cool edge of autumn, that in-between time when the world exhales after the harvest rush. A brief moment to breathe before winter tightens its grip. You wrap your shawl around your shoulders and step outside again, just for a moment, into the fading light. The breeze has teeth now. The sky is a stretched canvas of gold and purple. Smoke curls from distant chimneys. Chickens settle into their roosts. Somewhere a cow huffs a deep, satisfied grunt. Autumn evenings have a way of tricking you into thinking the world is peaceful, but your mind already jumps forward to winter preparations. You crouch beside a stack of firewood and run your hand over the rough bark. Is there enough to last the season? Winter is the most demanding overseer of all. Firewood, grain stores, preserved meat, dried herbs, it all has to be ready, even when you think you have. Enough you can still wake up one morning to frost creeping up the walls and realize you miscalculated. And winter does not accept apologies. A gust of wind sweeps across the yard, stirring fallen leaves into a twirling dance that looks magical from far away and annoying up close. You catch one leaf before it skitters off. It's crisp, brown, its veins shaped like tiny rivers. It reminds you of how fragile everything feels when the cold comes. You hear footsteps behind you, the neighbour, carrying a covered basket. She lifts the cloth to reveal small apples, shriveled but sweet. "Windfall from our tree," she says. "Take some." You accept with gratitude. Autumn generosity keeps the peace. Winter scarcity tests it. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some villagers believe that eating the very last apple of the harvest season ensures you won't go hungry during winter. You're tempted to keep one apple aside for luck. Not that you fully believe it, but in a world that often feels like a negotiation with nature, a little superstition softens the edges. You both stand there, quietly surveying the sky. The neighbour pulls her shawl tighter. "Feels like an early winter," she murmurs. You nod, though historians still argue whether medieval people could accurately predict seasonal shifts based on clouds, wind patterns, or animal behaviour. Some say they were attuned to nature's rhythms. Others say it was guesswork dressed up as wisdom. Either way, everyone tries. You hand back the basket and head inside, the apples tucked into your apron. The house greets you with warmth. You think of summer. Long days, sunburned shoulders, sweat dripping down your back as you threshed grain or stirred vats of dye under the open sky. Those days feel impossibly far away now. You return to the hearth and place the apples in a woven basket near the table. Autumn fruit doesn't last long. You'll dry slices tomorrow, maybe stew a few tonight for dessert. A treat your household rarely gets, but always savours. You sit for a moment, letting your body settle into the quiet. The firelight flickers against the walls, painting them in warm hues. You feel the pull of the seasons inside you. How each one rewrites your routines, shifts your priorities, shapes your mood. Summer drains you, autumn steadies you, winter challenges you, spring revives you. Someone calls from outside, a muffled request about whether the goats have been fed. You sigh, stand again, and step toward the door. That's the thing about the seasons. They keep moving, and so do you. Outside, the wind has picked up. You wrap your shawl tighter, head toward the small pen, check the feed, adjust the gate. The goats blink at you serenely, as if winter is not their problem. You envy them a little. When you return inside, the air smells rich. Dinner almost ready. Children's voices drift in from the next room. Your husband steps in from the yard, dusting off hay. He glances at the apples and nods, approvingly. You stir the pot one last time, the broth thick now, herbs floating gently on the surface. The day is shifting into evening, and with it the work shifts too, but it never disappears, it just changes shape. Because in your world, the seasons aren't a background, they are the script. The landscape is your clock, your planner, your guide. You breathe in the warmth of the house, letting it sink into your bones. Tomorrow the weather will shape you again. It always does. You finish tending the goats and step back inside, rubbing your hands together for warmth. The evening is deepening now, stretching its quiet fingers across the village. But before you can fully settle into the comfort of firelight and stew, there's one more obligation tugging at you, a task that sometimes feels small, sometimes feels strange, and occasionally feels like an adventure you didn't ask for, travelling beyond the village. Not a long journey, not some heroic trek across kingdoms, just a short walk to the next settlement, carrying a small bundle of spun yarn to trade, or delivering a message for a neighbour, or accompanying someone who needs an extra pair of watchful eyes. In medieval life, travel is rarely dramatic. It's practical, slow, and full of limitations, especially for women. You grab your cloak again, pull it tight around your shoulders, and step into the fading light. The sun is a low burnished coin slipping behind the hills, casting long shadows across the road. Your husband nods from the doorway. Not quite permission, not quite goodbye, just a quiet acknowledgement that you're heading out and he'll mind things here. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Women in medieval villages did travel, but usually for short distances and very specific reasons. Fetching supplies, visiting kin, attending markets or church festivals, going to mills, or delivering small goods and messages. Long-distance travel was rare unless forced by marriage, moving households, or crisis. Roads weren't unsafe because of constant danger. Mostly they were just inconvenient, muddy, rutted, or barely more than footpaths carved by generations of feet. You start walking, basket in hand, feeling the uneven ground beneath your shoes. roots snake across the path, stones jut up at odd angles, and puddles from yesterday's rain glisten like tiny traps. You step carefully. You've twisted your ankle before, and once is enough for a lifetime. A breeze nudges the tall grass on either side of the road, whispering softly. Birds settle into the hedges, offering little chirps that sound like gossip about your walking pace. You glance around, half amused, half wary. Even a short journey holds its risks. Wandering livestock, loose dogs, the occasional stranger, or just the sheer inconvenience of getting stuck in mud deep enough to swallow a shoe hole. You adjust your pace and let your mind wander. When you were younger, the road felt bigger, more mysterious. You used to imagine what lay beyond the horizon. Castles, seas, foreign lands. Now? Right now, you'd settle for a path without potholes. Halfway along the road, you encounter a pair of women carrying baskets of apples and dried herbs. You exchange greetings and fall into step beside them. They're headed to the next village to trade with a relative. You join the little procession, the rhythm of footsteps and quiet conversation making the journey lighter. You chat about ordinary things, weather, chores, who's mending what, whether the miller is overcharging for grain again. One woman mentions a rumour that wolves were spotted near the forest edge 2 nights ago. You frown, glancing toward the shadowy tree line. Wolves aren't common here, but they're not impossible either. The woman leans in and whispers a quirky tidbit. Some villagers believe wolves avoid paths walked by women because women's footsteps confuse their senses. You nearly snort. If anything, wolves probably avoid the roads because humans are too noisy. As you continue walking, you think about the subtle restrictions that shape your movement. There's no written rule forbidding you from travelling far, but social expectations wrap around you like invisible vines. Women travelling alone raise eyebrows. Women travelling far raise questions. Women travelling without permission from a husband or father raise trouble. You navigate these boundaries with the same skill you use to navigate muddy roads, carefully, strategically, quietly. Ahead, a cart approaches, pulled by a donkey who looks deeply uninterested in life. The driver, a middle-aged man, offers a polite nod as you step aside to let the cart pass. Dust stirs around your feet. You wave, and he continues on, humming a tune about barley prices, which is exactly as thrilling as it sounds. You reach the neighbouring village just as the sky shifts into twilight. The houses look similar to your own, timber frames, thatched roofs, smoke curling from chimneys. Chickens peck in the dirt. A couple of children chase each other around a tree. It feels familiar but slightly different, like a cousin to your home rather than a sibling. You hand off your small bundle of yarn to the woman you were asked to deliver it to. She thanks you warmly, offering a slice of dried pear in return. You accept. Travel taxes must be paid in snacks, apparently. Now it's time to head back. The road is darker on the return journey, shadows pooling in dips and hollows. You walk a bit faster, not because you're scared, but because the idea of tripping in the dark is embarrassingly plausible. The women you travelled with earlier have already turned off toward their own homes, leaving you alone with the soft crunch of leaves underfoot. You think about another scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether medieval roads were dangerous at night or whether the peril of the dark is exaggerated by later storytelling. Some records mention bandits, others barely mention crime at all. The truth? Probably somewhere in between. Tonight, though, the road feels calm. No bandits, no wolves. Just the quiet hum of the world settling into night. You reach your village as stars blink awake in the sky. A lantern glows near your doorway. Someone lit it for you. You smile. Little gestures matter. Inside, the fire is warm. The children are half asleep. Your husband nods in your direction without interrupting the mending he's attempting, and poorly. You take over the task with a sigh and a smirk. Travel wasn't far, but it was enough to feel the world beyond your doorstep, a world both familiar and constrained, small yet full of quiet stories. You hang your cloak, set down your basket, and settle back into your place. The road is behind you. Home wraps itself around you again. You settle back into your home just long enough to shake the dust from your cloak, but your hands barely pause before moving again. The bundle of yarn you delivered earlier reminds you of your own unfinished pile. Half-spun thread, undyed wool, a few small pieces of fabric that need hemming before someone inevitably tears them again. But today isn't just about mending. Today You also have work tied to your small craft, one of the countless cottage trades medieval women quietly sustain without ever being called artisans, even though you absolutely are. You sit at your table and pick up a length of rough linen cloth you've been weaving over the past week. The loom, simple, wooden, squeaky in all the wrong places, waits against the wall. You settle in front of it with the practiced comfort of someone who's spent hundreds of hours here. Weaving isn't glamorous. It isn't leisurely. It's work that takes quiet concentration, patience, and the ability to ignore the way your back aches after too much bending. A mainstream historical fact floats up. Medieval women contributed heavily to the household economy through cottage industries, spinning, weaving, dyeing, brewing, basket making, cheese making, and other small crafts done at home. These trades didn't always get formal recognition, but they were essential. Your work isn't a hobby, it's survival income. You resume weaving, shifting the shuttle back and forth through the warp threads. The repetitive motion is rhythmic, almost musical. The thread tightens, the pattern grows, imperfect but functional. Outside, chickens bicker beneath the window. Inside, the fire pops in gentle rhythm. Your hands move like they remember everything, even when your mind wanders, and wander it does. You think of the dyeing you must do later, a small batch of wool that needs dunking into a cauldron filled with crushed madder root. It'll turn the fibres a muted red, the colour of practicality, not luxury. True, expensive dyes like indigo or bright purple aren't for everyday folk like you, but earthy reds, soft yellows from onion skins, greens from nettles, these are colours within reach, colours you coax into cloth the same way you coax dough into bread and fire into life. A quirky tidbit flits into your memory. Some dyers believed that certain colours took better if the wool was dyed during a waxing moon. Others swore you had to sing to the dye pot to keep the colour awake. You've never tested the singing theory, but you've also never completely ignored it. A quiet hum while stirring can't hurt. You tie off a section of the cloth and lean back, stretching your shoulders. Beside you on the bench is a pair of wooden shoes someone asked you to repair. A leather strap ripped during field work. You pick them up, inspecting the damage. You can fix it. You fix almost everything. That's what women do. As you work the leather, sewing it back into place with small, tight stitches, you overhear voices outside. Teenagers returning from apprenticing with the village carpenter or blacksmith. Trades traditionally dominated by men, but some women, especially widows or daughters of craftsmen, learned trades too. And that brings you back to another scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether women participated meaningfully in formal trades or whether they were pushed out by guild regulations. Some records show women working as brewers, alewives, midwives, spinners, tailors, even parchment makers. Others show guilds slowly restricting their roles. As with so much else in medieval life, the truth shifts depending on the village, the family, the year. You finish the shoe repair and set the pair aside, satisfied. It's not elegant, but it's sturdy. That's almost craft's demand here. Practicality over perfection. A knock at your door breaks the quiet. You open it to find a young woman from the village holding a basket. Inside are wool scraps, tangled and useless to her, but perfect for stuffing cushions or adding bulk to winter linens. She asks if you can turn some into thread she can use. You agree, because this is how your small trade survives. Barter, goodwill, skill passed hand to hand. She lingers for a moment, then hesitates before asking if you'll check a loose seam in her only good tunic. You smile, take the garment, and promise to return it by tomorrow. She leaves with relief written all over her face. You return to the table, place the tunic down gently, and begin examining the stitches. Your home slowly fills with the signs of your craft. Threads curled around your wrists, scraps of fabric in piles, the faint scent of dye plants hanging in the air. As the light from the window dims, you light a small oil lamp. Its glow catches the woven cloth on the loom, making the threads shimmer faintly. You feel a flicker of pride. Your work may not make you rich, may not be displayed in noble houses or listed in records, but it is real. It keeps your household warm, clothed, and fed. It connects you to other women, craftswomen in all but name, who keep the village economy alive with quiet skill. You finish the tunic repair and set it aside, folding it neatly. Outside, the air cools further, the shadows stretch long. The world slows, but your hands keep working, measured steady, sure, craft by craft, stitch by stitch, thread by thread. This is your trade. This is your contribution. This is your expertise. You take a deep breath, let the fire's warmth reach your face, and continue weaving into the night. You rub your eyes and stretch your fingers, feeling the ache of weaving slowly fade as another kind of weight settles onto your shoulders, the soft but ever-present awareness of the people who stand above you in the village hierarchy. Lords, stewards, bailiffs, laws written by men who will never know the shape of your daily exhaustion. You can ignore them most days, tucked safely within your routines, but never for long. Authority has a way of reminding you it exists precisely when you're not in the mood. Outside, the air is dimming into evening blue as you step out to check the coop, your basket now empty except for a few scraps of cloth. The chickens cluck sleepily, unimpressed by your presence, and you count them automatically. All present. Good. You turn to leave, only to spot a rider approaching on the main path. A small group gathers as he dismounts. He's not noble, his clothes are plain, though slightly nicer than yours, but he carries the kind of posture that suggests he speaks on behalf of someone who is noble. A reeve or a bailiff, perhaps? The kind of man who deals in numbers, rents, dues, obligations. Your stomach tightens in that instinctive way it always does when authority wanders into view. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Medieval peasants owed rents, taxes, labour obligations, and dues to the lord who owned the land. Women, married or not, were still responsible for a share of these duties, especially anything tied to household productivity. If your husband is absent, ill or away, you're the one who faces the reeve, and even when he's present, you're the one who has to deal with the fallout. The reeve announces the reason for his visit. Next week, a labour rotation on the Lord's domain fields. Several families are required to provide workers. Your household is among them. You nod quietly as he reads the list. It's not unexpected. These tasks cycle regularly, but the timing could be better. It always could be better. You and a few other women exchange glances. The Lord's fields aren't particularly close, and the soil is stubborn at this time of year. It will be long, hard work. You mentally add domain labour to your list of tasks, even though your list was already full enough to make a grown saint cry. As the reeve rides off, the murmurs begin. He always shows up at dusk, someone grumbles. Like he wants to catch us tired, another adds. Historians still argue whether reeves were necessary evils or just unnecessarily annoying. You mutter under your breath, earning a snicker from the woman next to you. You head back inside, closing the door behind you. The house feels smaller now, the fire quieter. You sit on the bench for a moment, letting the news settle. Taxes, rents, obligations, they're constant shadows. You live with them the way you live with the changing seasons, unavoidable, immovable, and occasionally infuriating. A knock at your door interrupts your thoughts. It's an older woman from 2 houses over, clutching a roll of parchment. She ushers herself in without waiting. Privacy is optional when news is involved. "Have you heard?" she asks. She spreads the parchment out on your table. It's a notice from the steward, the Lord's representative, about adjustments to grain tithes. More grain owed from each family this year. You inhale sharply. Grain is already tight. Another increase feels cruel. "And they expect us to smile while handing it over," she mutters. You run your fingers along the ink, noting the clumsy script. The steward likely didn't write it. Scribes do that. But he's the one who enforces it. You think of the steward's stiff posture, his fur-trimmed cloak, the way he inspects people the same way he inspects fences and barns, as objects in need of assessment. A quirky tidbit floats into your memory. Some people believed that nobles had a special divine scent distinguishing them from commoners. Completely untrue, of course. If anything, nobles often smelled worse because they bathed less. But it shows how deeply people internalize class differences. Sometimes superstition becomes a coping mechanism. Later in the evening, your husband returns from speaking with a group of men discussing the new obligations. He sighs heavily as he sits down, rubbing the bridge of his nose. You serve him a bowl of stew and he accepts it wordlessly, lost in thought. "Another increase," he says finally, "and the steward says it's because of last year's poor yields." "But that wasn't our fault," you reply. He shrugs with one shoulder. Frustration, resignation, and fatigue, all tangled together. Doesn't matter whose fault it was. You both fall silent. The fire crackles. A pot hisses gently. The children whisper to one another on their pallet. You think about the thin line medieval families walk, how one poor harvest, one harsh winter, one increase in obligations can push a household from stability into desperation. You think of how women carry these pressures silently while working harder, stretching food further, patching holes, saving scraps, softening blows. You think too of something that often gets overlooked. Women understand the law in practice better than many men do. You know what can be asked of you and what cannot. You know when to push back and when not to. You know which obligations are flexible and which are absolute. It's not written knowledge, it's lived knowledge. As the evening deepens, you step outside again. A thin moon glows behind drifting clouds. You hear someone chopping wood in the distance, someone else arguing softly, a baby crying, a dog barking at nothing. Village life continues. You pull your shawl tighter, feeling the weight of responsibility and the promise of another long day tomorrow. Lords and laws may shape the edges of your life, but within those edges, you still carve space for your own strength, your own skill, your own survival. You head back inside. Closing the night behind you, the fire is waiting, so is tomorrow. You close the door behind you and lean against it for a moment, letting the warmth of the hearth kiss your cheeks. The weight of obligations still sits in your chest, but evenings like this offer one rare, shimmering antidote, the promise of music, laughter, stories, and whatever scraps of joy your village manages to stitch together between long days of work. Festivals and recreation aren't luxuries here. They're survival tools, emotional fuel, tiny rebellions against exhaustion. You glance around the house. Dinner bowls are empty, small hands and faces mostly wiped clean, the air thick with the comforting scent of stew and smoke. The children perk up when they sense what's coming. Someone outside calls your name, their voice bright in the cool evening. A neighbour leans in through your half-open shutter. We're gathering by the green. You smile. It's been a long week. A gathering is exactly what the village needs. You wrap your shawl around your shoulders and step into the dusk. The skies are deepening indigo, pierced by early stars. Lanterns sway in a gentle breeze as families drift toward the village green, a patch of grass that serves as a festival ground, meeting place, playground, and occasionally the unofficial courtroom for goat-related disputes. A mainstream historical fact echoes in your mind. Medieval villages held frequent small festivals, seasonal celebrations, saints' days, and simple social gatherings. Music, dancing, and storytelling were woven into community life, not as entertainment, but as shared cultural glue. Life was too hard not to make space for joy. You arrive to see people forming a loose circle. Someone has brought a drum, really just a stretched hide over a wooden frame, but it thumps with a steady heartbeat. Another person carries a stringed instrument, its tones soft and earthy. A few children dance around them, twirling with the kind of reckless enthusiasm only children and slightly tipsy adults can manage. You join the group and take a seat on the grass. The music starts, not polished, not perfect, but warm. Voices rise in song, layered with harmonies as natural as breathing. You hum along, letting the melody settle into your bones. A woman beside you nudges your arm, grinning. Remember last year when Tom tried to sing the harvest song and forgot every word? You laugh. Poor Tom. He still gets teased for turning a 3-verse hymn into a chaotic mumble. You promise yourself not to bring it up. Tonight, anyway. Someone starts a rhythmic clapping sequence and more people join in. Children mimic the motions, adding extra claps out of sync. No one minds. The music grows louder, faster. Bodies sway. Laughter floats through the air. A quirky tidbit filters into your thoughts. In some villages, it was believed that dancing in a circle with neighbours strengthened community bonds and warded off bad luck for the coming season. Whether it's true or not, you feel a kind of closeness here, a warmth that isn't from the fire or the lanterns, but from shared struggle and shared release. A pair of older men begin a lively argument over who can play the drum better. They settle it the medieval way, by taking turns while the crowd cheers for the winner. Neither is especially talented, but both are wildly confident. Children roar with laughter every time a beat lands wildly off rhythm. Nearby, women sit in a small cluster exchanging stories, some factual, some aspirational. One woman claims her cousin saw a travelling performer who could juggle fire. Another insists the forest spirit stole her spoon last week. You raise an eyebrow at that one, and she nods solemnly. I heard rustling, she whispers. You choose not to challenge the story. A little mystery spices up the night. You take a moment to lie back on the grass, the cool earth grounding you as you watch the sky. Stars blink through the branches overhead. The drumbeat vibrates through the soil. Voices blur into a soothing tapestry of life continuing. A scholarly debate flits across your mind, almost comically out of place. Historians still argue whether medieval recreation offered enough emotional relief to balance the demands of hard labour. Some say it did. Joy was as essential as bread. Others argue it wasn't enough to offset the daily grind. Lying here, you think the truth is somewhere in the middle. Entertainment doesn't erase hardship, but it gives you strength to meet it again tomorrow. Someone starts telling a story, an old folk tale about a cunning girl who tricked a troll into abandoning a bridge. You sit up, listening. The storyteller gestures dramatically, casting shadows across the faces gathered around them. The children lean in, wide-eyed, gripping each other's sleeves during the scary parts. You remember hearing versions of this tale when you were a child, each retelling slightly different, shaped by the storyteller's memory, mood, or desire to terrify the audience into behaving. As the tale ends, the crowd applauds. A few villagers begin a simple line dance, stepping in patterns you know instinctively. You join them, laughing when you stumble, guiding younger dancers who try to copy the steps with exaggerated seriousness. Your feet move in rhythm with the drum. Your breath forms soft clouds in the cooling air. Your heart feels lighter than it has all day. By the time the music softens and families begin heading home, the moon hangs high and full, bathing the village green in silver. You walk back slowly, feeling the gentle ache in your legs, the good kind, the kind that comes from joy rather than labour. When you reach your doorway, you pause, taking in the quiet hum of the night. For a moment, life feels balanced. Hardship and joy, work and rest, strain and song. You slip inside, carry that balance with you, and let it soften your steps. Tomorrow will be hard again. But tonight you danced. You ease back inside with the faint echo of music, still warming your chest. But the night has its own atmosphere now, quiet, slower, layered with shadows that seem to breathe with the house. The children are finally asleep, sprawled in angles only children can manage. Your husband is dozing lightly, boots still on, body tilted like a tree stump someone forgot to push upright. The fire whispers low, casting soft gold across the floor. This is the hour when the mind drifts to the unseen corners of medieval life. The charms, omens, rituals, little beliefs that slip between chores and responsibilities like tiny threads. You wouldn't call yourself superstitious. No one does. Yet you still touch wood when someone mentions illness. You still hang herbs above the doorway. You still mutter a half-joke prayer when the wind howls too hard. You settle onto the bench, pulling your shawl around your shoulders, and reach for the small pouch that holds your household charms. Some are gifts, some are habits, all a part of the daily tapestry. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Medieval people, women in particular, relied heavily on folk beliefs and protective rituals woven into daily routines. These practices weren't separate from religion. They lived alongside it, intertwined like roots of the same old tree. Where the church offered doctrine, folk magic offered reassurance. You pull out a sprig of rosemary tied with red thread. A neighbour gave it to you last winter to keep misfortune out of the house. You didn't necessarily believe it then, but you hung it anyway. Tonight you replace the worn thread with a new one, the fibres soft and warm under your fingers. A cat slinks toward you, tail curling. It blinks up at you with what looks like ancient wisdom, or just hunger. Hard to tell. Cats in medieval villages hold a strange place in people's minds, cherished for their rodent hunting prowess, yet occasionally eyed with suspicion whenever gossip turns toward witchcraft. You scratch behind its ear anyway. If this cat has mystical powers, it's certainly not using them to help with chores. As you tie the charm, your thoughts drift to omens. You've heard them since childhood. If a candle flickers without wind, someone is thinking of you. If bread cracks strangely, a storm is coming. If a bird perches on your windowsill and stares too long, expect news. If a spoon drops, a guest will visit. Some seem harmless, others unsettling. Like the belief that leaving shoes upside down invites wandering spirits, or that sweeping at night brushes good luck out the door. You don't fully believe these, but you don't test them either. A soft knock taps at your door. You stiffen slightly. Nighttime visits always carry a whisper of urgency. You open the door to find one of the village girls, barefoot, breathless, clutching a small wooden token in her hands. "Can you bless this for me?" she asks quietly. Bless is a generous word. You're no priest. But everyone knows certain women in the village, mothers, widows, midwives, hold small rituals that come from older traditions, comforting gestures passed from hand to hand. You motion her inside and sit beside her on the bench. The token is simple, a tiny carved bird, something her brother made. She asks for protection while he travels to the mill tomorrow. A long walk, bad weather forecast, wolves rumoured near the forest again. You cup the token in your hands, close your eyes, and whisper one of the old verses your grandmother taught you. A short string of gentle words, not quite a prayer, not quite a spell, just a fragment of comfort wrapped in breath. The girl watches, eyes wide. When you return the carving, she clasps it with both hands and hugs you impulsively. Then she disappears into the night, feet pattering softly on the dirt path. You sit in the stillness, the moment lingering. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your thoughts. Some medieval households placed iron tools under beds to ward off nightmares. Others sprinkled salt across thresholds to deter mischievous spirits. One woman swears by hanging horsehair above her door. Another buries eggshells near her garden to confuse the fairies. Whether you believe or not, these rituals make people feel less alone in a world full of unpredictability. You rise and move toward the door, checking the latch twice, a habit that might be more superstition than security. Outside, the moon is bright, illuminating the fields in ripples of silver. The wind rattles a loose shutter. Somewhere, an owl hoots, a sound that some interpret as wisdom and others as warning. And then, as always, your thoughts drift toward those scholarly debates that hover at the edges of daily life. Historians still argue whether medieval superstitions were sincere beliefs or simply cultural habits people performed without thinking. Did people truly fear sprites and spirits? Or were these stories tools to explain the unexplainable? The lines blur. For you, it's simple. The rituals soothe the parts of your heart untouched by logic. You return inside, closing the night behind you, and sit again near the fire. The flames dance, shadows softening as they climb the wall. You unwrap a small bundle from your shelf, dried lavender and thyme tied together with twine, a sleep charm. You hang it above the children's pallet, brushing your fingers over their hair as they breathe in steady rhythms. The house is safe, quiet, wrapped in the invisible comfort of all the small rituals you've woven into your day. You sit for a moment longer, listening to the fire's soft crackle, the steady breathing of your family, the distant hush of the wind. In a world full of uncertainty, superstition becomes a way to carve tiny pockets of control, and in its own humble way, it works. The house is quiet now, but you know better than to trust quiet. In your world, calm is often what happens just before something unpleasant knocks on the door without wiping its feet. And sure, enough it doesn't take long. It starts with a cough. Not the harmless little sniffle you dealt with earlier, but a deep, dragging, chest-rattling cough from the next house over. You hear it even with the shutters closed, the sound squeezing through the walls like it's searching for new lungs to visit. You freeze for a heartbeat, then move toward the door. Outside, the night is colder, darker, but one window glows too bright. You step out and, like iron filings to a magnet, a few other women are already converging on the same house, shawls clutched, faces tight. You follow them, because when something goes wrong in the village, women are the first to arrive and the last to leave. Inside, the air feels thick, hot, damp, heavy with worry. The sick man lies on a pallet near the fire, his skin flushed, breath shallow. His wife kneels beside him, eyes wide, hands shaking. Children huddle in a corner, clinging to each other. You don't need anyone to explain. Illness doesn't knock gently. You set down your basket and move into action with the others. One woman fetches water. Another throws open the shutter to let in cold air. You kneel near the hearth, grabbing the herbs you know by heart. Thyme, willow, anything that might ease pain or calm fever. It's not fancy. It's not certain. But it's something. A mainstream historical fact floats through your mind even as you work. In medieval Europe, epidemics and local outbreaks of illness, whether plague, fevers, or nameless sicknesses, regularly swept through villages, and women's informal caregiving networks were often the first line of defence. No hospitals here, no clean linens from a supply closet, no doctor paging on call. Just you, your neighbours, and whatever remedies you've managed not to run out of this week. You soak a cloth in cool water and press it to the man's forehead. His wife squeezes your arm, panic shaking her grip. "Will he be all right?" she whispers. You don't answer with promises. You answer with tasks. More water, move the children back, keep the fire small but steady. This is how you cope, one instruction at a time, like stepping stones across a rushing river. Hours blur. The coughs come and go in waves. You and the other women take turns wiping his face, steadying his shoulders, holding the cup to his lips when he's able to swallow. Someone jokes, softly, gently, that if he survives, he owes all of you extra bread for a month. It earns a weak laugh from the wife, and that's enough to keep you going. Eventually, when the man's breathing settles into something less frightening, you slip outside with the others. The air feels shockingly cold after the fever heat inside. You pull your shawl tight, the night suddenly sharper, more fragile. The woman beside you mutters, "If one houseful's sick, the whole street follows." You know she's not entirely wrong. Contagion doesn't understand property boundaries. You all stand there, in uneasy silence, staring at the ground like answers might be written in the dirt. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. Some people believe illness travels in evil winds, slipping through cracks and keyholes. Others hang certain herbs in doorways, rue, sage, or yarrow, to block sickness from entering. You've seen doorframes crowded with bundles that look like leafy moustaches. Do they work? Hard to say. But nobody's eager to take them down and test the theory. Over the next few days, things don't get easier. The rumour spreads that crops in a neighbouring village failed badly this year. Their harvest was thin, sickly, more stalk than grain. That's how famine begins, not as a sudden dramatic disaster, but as a slow tightening of belts and loosening of rules about what counts as food. Your grain stores suddenly look smaller than they did last week. Rations quietly shrink. Bread slices become thinner. Stew stretches further, with more water and fewer vegetables. You cut the apples into smaller pieces for the children, pretending you're not absolutely doing the math in your head. How many weeks? How many mouths? How much can you dilute without anyone noticing? Women begin meeting more often in low, serious clusters. You trade recipes that are less meals and more creative negotiations with hunger. Thickened broths, mashed roots, strange porridges that only taste good if you're very optimistic or very starving. You learn how to toast old bread to disguise the staleness. You joke that you're becoming culinary geniuses. It's either laugh about it or cry in the pantry. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants lived constantly on the edge of famine, or whether only the worst years pushed them into real starvation. From where you're standing, with your fingers tracing the rim of a nearly empty grain sack, it doesn't feel like theory. It feels like tight throats, growling stomachs, and counting every kernel as if it were gold. And then, as if illness and hunger weren't enough, danger occasionally wears a very human face. You remember one year, not too long ago, when armed men rode through the region. Not a full army, not a grand campaign, just a band of soldiers with unclear orders and too much time. They didn't come all the way into your village, but word reached you fast. A farmstead not far away robbed, animals taken, a barn burned. No one killed, thank whatever powers are listening, but the message was clear. You can do everything right and still be at the mercy of someone else's war. Ever since then, you and the other women pay close attention to distant dust clouds on the horizon, to travellers asking too many questions, to the way your husbands stand a little closer to the tools that double as weapons. Through all of this, illness, scarcity, danger, the one thing that doesn't falter is the web of women around you. When one family's child burns with fever, others appear with herbs, extra, cloth, a hand on the shoulder. When a widow's roof leaks in a storm, it's the women who arrive with thatch, rope, nimble fingers, and frankly, impressive balance. When someone's husband drinks too much and shouts too loud, a neighbour just happens to drop by, a calm presence that shifts the tone in the room without saying a word. You learn to read each other's faces like weather signs, that tight jaw, worry about a sick relative, That thin smile, hiding news of bad harvest. That sudden visit with extra bread. Charity disguised as sharing, because no one here wants to be a charity case. You don't call it a support system. You don't call it solidarity. You just call it life. One evening, after several hard weeks, you find yourself standing by the well with a few other women. The air's cold enough to sting your lungs. Your buckets are nearly full. Someone makes a sarcastic remark about how water at least is free, and you all laugh a little too hard. It feels good. It feels necessary. On the way back, one of them slips a small bundle into your basket when she thinks you're not looking. Dried beans, carefully wrapped. You see it, of course. You pretend not to, and later you'll return the favour with a piece of cloth or a share of next week's bread once things ease. This is how you survive hard times, not alone, not heroically, but quietly, stubbornly, together. You step back into your house at the end of another long, complicated day. The fire is low. The children are curled up like kittens. Your husband snores softly, one hand still resting near the tool he used outside. You hang your shawl, sit beside the hearth and exhale. The world is dangerous, the world is unfair, but you are still here, and so are they. You linger by the hearth for a moment longer, letting the last echoes of fear, relief and gratitude slowly slip from your shoulders. The crisis of illness has eased, at least for tonight. The hunger worries have settled into their usual place, humming quietly in the background like a nervous heartbeat. But now, as the fire softens and the night deepens, the house pulls you gently into one of the rarest parts of your day, the slow drift toward evening routines and storytelling. You rise, stretching the stiffness from your back, and move across the room with soft steps. The children stir in their sleep, sensing your presence the way small animals sense warmth. You adjust one child's blanket, tuck another's foot back under the pallet, and smooth a rumpled tunic lying on the floor. These motions are so familiar they've become muscle memory, almost like a dance you perform without thinking. Your husband wakes with a start when you nudge his shoulder. Not fully awake, not fully asleep, just hovering in that foggy medieval twilight of exhaustion. He rubs his eyes, yawns, mutters something about the fence he worked on earlier, and then shuffles toward the door to make sure it's latched properly. Secure, solid. One less thing to worry about. With the house inspected and the little one settled, your final tasks for the day begin. You light a small oil lamp, just enough glow to push back the darkness without wasting precious fuel. The shadows stretch long across the low ceiling beams, transforming the familiar shapes of tools, baskets, and stools into something older, more mythical. This is the hour when stories feel truer than daylight, when the hard edges of the world soften just enough to let a little wonder slip through the cracks. You sit on the bench and begin mending a tear in a child's sleeve. The rhythmic pull of the needle through cloth is soothing. Not exciting, not easy, but soothing in that quiet way that tells your body it's allowed to breathe again. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind. Evening was often the only time medieval families had for leisure together. Time by the fire to mend, talk, tell stories, sing, or simply exist in companionable silence. For women especially, this time offered a subtle shift from labour to connection. Not rest exactly, but a softer form of work. You hear your husband return from the door, his steps slow and heavy. He sits beside you, picks up a wooden spoon, and begins whittling absent-mindedly. He's carved dozens like it, some smooth, some clumsy, some recognisable only because he insists they're spoons. But this quiet craft, like your stitching, centres him. The children stir, sensing voices and light. One of the youngest crawls from the pallet and climbs into your lap, warm and floppy with sleep. You gently rock them, humming a tune passed down through generations, something wordless, just a drifting melody that settles over the room like a soft blanket. Then comes the whispered request. Tell the story. You smile. The story. The nightly ritual that has survived famine, chores, arguments, broken tools, sick goats, and every hardship the day throws at you. You shift your weight, settle the child against your shoulder, and begin. Your voice is quiet, low, a soft ripple in the warm air. You tell the tale of the girl who outsmarted the river spirit by offering it a mirror, how the spirit became so mesmerized by its own reflection that it forgot to flood the fields. The older children smile in their sleep, recognizing the beginning from hundreds of nights before. The younger ones blink slowly, eyes heavy, breaths calm. As you weave the tale, you add tiny embellishments, an extra ripple of water, a more dramatic gasp from the spirit, a clever twist in the heroine's plan. The children giggle softly. Your husband snorts at one detail, muttering something about river spirits never keeping their promises. You keep going anyway. A quirky tidbit floats through your thoughts. Some medieval people believed stories told at night held special power, shaping dreams or warding off nightmares. Others believed that telling stories after dark invited spirits to listen in, but only the friendly ones. Whether any of that is true, you don't know, but you do know this. Stories make the heaviness of the day feel lighter. When the tale ends, the room is still. The children breathe slow and even. Your husband leans back, eyelids drooping. You keep the lamp low to save oil. The fire crackles softly, and the only sound outside is the gentle rustle of wind through the thatch roof. As you sit there, holding the sleeping child, your mind drifts toward one of those scholarly debates again. Historians still argue whether medieval evenings were moments of relaxation or simply extensions of work in quieter form. You suspect the truth lives somewhere between the shadows and the firelight. Yes, you're still working, mending clothes, sorting wool, checking the hearth, but you're also reclaiming a piece of your humanity, gently, intentionally. With the mended sleeve finished, you set it aside and reach for a small handful of dried apple slices, a simple treat. You nibble one, savouring the sweetness. Even small pleasures feel monumental in a world shaped by scarcity. Your husband murmurs a question about tomorrow's tasks, whether the grain should be sifted in the morning or before noon, whether the children should help shell beans after breakfast. You answer quietly, closing your eyes for a moment. Planning the next day is a ritual too. Finally, when everything feels soft and still, you whisper to your husband that it's time to bank the fire. He rises groggily, moves the ashes with practiced care, leaves just enough ember to spark in the morning. The glow dims, the air shifts. You guide the last child back to the pallet, tucking them between their siblings. Their tiny hands curl into the blanket, their breath deepens, the fire gives one last pop, like a tiny sigh, before settling into silence. You sit on the edge of the pallet for a moment, brushing a stray curl from a forehead, feeling the weight of the day melt into the softness of night. Evening routines aren't glamorous, but they are the threads that hold the day together, the familiar motions that remind you quietly that you've made it through another cycle of work, worry and wonder. You blow out the lamp. Shadows settle around you like gentle arms, and in the hush of the house, you finally let yourself exhale. Night settles over the village with a softness the daylight never manages, a slow exhale of darkness that slips through cracks in the shutters and settles into the creases of the house. The fire is banked low, the embers glowing like tiny eyes beneath a blanket of ash. You move quietly now, because the world has shifted into its nighttime rhythm, and everything feels more delicate. Even your own breath seems a little softer, a little more careful. You kneel beside the hearth, running your fingers lightly through the warm ashes to make sure nothing is smouldering too fiercely. The faint heat pulses against your palm, steady and reassuring. Tomorrow morning, when you coax the embers back to life, this warmth will feel like a small victory. Tonight, it's simply the last task before sleep. You stand and stretch, feeling each muscle unfurl after a long day's work. Medieval days are long even in summer, but nights belong to the household, to the hearth, to dreams and quiet routines. The children are already sprawled across their pallet like a pile of soft laundry, limbs in improbable positions, breath sinking with the faint crackle of the cooling fire. Your husband lies on his back, one arm thrown over his face, snoring with the confidence of a man who does not realize how loud he is. You smile faintly. It's a sound you've grown so used to that silence would feel more alarming. You move toward your spot near the pallet, your portion of the straw mattress, shared pillow, and soft wool blanket. Medieval sleeping arrangements aren't luxurious. There's no mattress filled with feathers, no fine linen sheets, no private bedroom. Just shared warmth, shared breath, shared space. Privacy is an exotic concept reserved for nobles and daydreams. As you settle onto the bedding, the straw rustles beneath you, poking in odd places but offering that familiar earthy scent. You turn onto your side, pulling the blanket over your shoulders. The air is cool and you curl slightly, letting your body form its own cocoon of comfort. A mainstream historical fact surfaces as you settle in. Many medieval families slept in phases, not a single uninterrupted block. First sleep and second sleep were common rhythms, people drifting off after dusk, waking around midnight for quiet tasks or prayer, then falling asleep again until dawn. You don't name it that way, but you've lived it your whole life. Tonight you feel the weight of first sleep tugging at you already, your eyelids heavy, your breathing deepening, your body sinking slowly into the mattress. But before you fully let go, you allow your thoughts to wander, drifting through memories of the day. You think of the market bustle, the music on the village green, the sick neighbour's gratitude, the stories whispered by firelight. You think of the road you walked earlier, the way the sky held its breath before sunset. You think of how your hands moved automatically through every task, how your feet carried you from chore to chore, how your heart, not your tools, held your household together. And then your thoughts drift towards something quieter, deeper, dreams. You've always dreamt vividly, sometimes of fields shimmering with impossible light, sometimes of rivers running backward, sometimes of voices from old stories calling your name. Other times, your dreams are simply comforting repetitions of daily routines, kneading dough, hanging herbs, spinning thread. Your mind rehearses life even in sleep. A quirky tidbit your grandmother once told you floats back. If you dream of weaving, she said, it means good news is coming. If you dream of rain, a visitor will arrive. If you dream of cats, expect mischief. Considering how often your real-life cat causes chaos, that one feels less mystical and more practical. As you shift under the blanket, you hear the faintest whisper of wind outside brushing against the thatch roof like a soft wandering hand. The house creaks in response, its old beams stretching like sleepy limbs. You close your eyes, letting the sounds lull you. Your husband mumbles something unintelligible in his sleep. One of the children turns over, snuffling. You rest your hand gently on the edge of their blanket, a small, instinctive gesture of protection. And right there, in the half-dark, you feel the weight of your own existence, a life built on tiny labours, silent strengths, repetitive tasks that shape not just your day, but your entire village. You're not celebrated, not written about, not carved into stone, but your hands hold the world together in ways no historian will ever fully capture. Historians still argue whether medieval nights were restful or restless, whether people slept deeply or woke frequently with chores still buzzing in their minds. For you, the truth is simple. Sleep is a refuge, yes, but also a continuation of living. Not an escape from your world, but a softer part of it. Your body grows heavier, softer, warmer. The straw rustles beneath you like a lullaby. The ember glow dims into darkness, and slowly, like sinking into deep water, you drift into sleep. Your last waking thought is a quiet one. Tomorrow will come early. But for now, you let go. The world softens as you drift deeper into the quiet, and the sounds of the medieval evening fade into a gentle hum, like distant waves or the sigh of wind over an old field. The fire settles into silence, the last ember flickering weakly before tucking itself into ash, and the cool air wraps itself around the house in long, slow breaths. Everything, every chore, every worry, every thought, loosens its hold on you with each passing moment. Your muscles unwind, your hands, so busy, so tireless, finally become still. The straw beneath you shifts gently as your body melts into it. No tension left to hold your shape upright. You feel your heartbeat slow, like it's syncing with the deep, timeless pulse of the earth outside. There's nothing left to do, nothing left to remember, nothing left waiting for you except rest. Your breathing grows longer, softer. Each inhale is a small wave rising. Each exhale is that same wave retreating quietly back into the sea. The day loosens its grip. The night welcomes you in. The room fades into a blur, the outlines of tools, baskets, and low beams dissolving into the warm darkness. Even the house seems to sleep now, its old wooden bones resting after a long day of sheltering those inside. You let your thoughts drift further, lighter, until they're no more substantial than dust motes in a sunbeam. Just soft shapes, just gentle impressions, just warmth. There's nothing you need to hold on to, nothing pulling at you, nothing heavy, only rest, only quiet, only the slow, peaceful rhythm of a night that carries you safely into sleep, the way it has for generations before you, and now, with one final, easy breath, you let yourself drift completely.